Hello, Watem here, and welcome back to some more Higurashi When They Cry. Yay, Hanyu's joining the club. Hanyu said it loudly, as if to shake off her embarrassment.
こりゃまだ驚いた。どこで誰におじさんたちのことを聞いたのやら。
僕も入れてほしいのです。僕も部活に混ぜてほしいなのです。よく自分で言えましたです。パチパチパチ。
Rika-chan must have known that Hanyu wanted to join the club all along. Mion folded her arms with a smile and stared at Hanyu as if appraising her. Needless to say, Hanyu was intimidated.
自分から好んで七に飛び込みたがるとこりゃとんでもない命知らずがいたもんだよ。でもね、うちの部活はそんじょそこらのおままごととは違うんだ。選ばれた者が試練をくぐり抜けた末にようやく入部を許される栄光の部活なんだよ。入れてください、はいそうですかってわけにはいかないね。
羽生ちゃん、みーちゃんの部活は見てる分にはとっても楽しいかもしれないけど、その、大変なんだよ。覚悟の上なのです。勝って当然。負けたらとんでもないことになってしまいますのよ。その覚悟は終わりですこと。僕も負けないのですよ。それに。
Hanyu swallowed once and said what was on her mind. It sounded like a big thing to say for her, as though it had much deeper meaning.
かつての僕は負けるのが嫌で全ての勝負から逃げていましたのです。でも逃げることは負けることにすら劣ること。負ける痛みにくじけず戦い続けて初めて勝ちを得られるのだと教えてもらいましたのですから。羽生。
When Mion realized that, although she looked timid, Hanyu is actually very courageous. She grinned. Looks like she's grown fond of her.
へえ、なかなかどうして大した根性じゃねえかよ。どうだよミオン、せっかくだから試してやったらいいじゃねえかよ。入部試験。
我が部にふさわしいかどうか、最低数週間の観察を経てようやく受けられる入部試験を転校初日からとはね。さてどうしたものか。
Mion pretended to be stubborn, but in reality she was simply playing with her. She actually didn't want her to join. She would have refused her right away. Of course, if Hanyu was bothered by this kind of intimidation, she wouldn't be able to survive in this club.
レナとサトコが今話したと思うけど、うちの部は厳しいよ。勝って当然。狙うは1位のみ。間違って最下位になった日にゃ生まれてきたことを後悔するような大変な目に遭わされるんだよ。
でも僕も頑張るのです。でも罰ゲームだってとっても楽しいんだよ。
Huh? Okay, Mascus. Hanyu-chan, you've been watching the whole time, huh? You've been wanting to join for the longest time, huh? I got the feeling that Rena had just mumbled something like that.
ミオン、もったいぶらないで試してやればいいじゃねえかよ。俺だってそいつをくぐって入部を許可されたはずだぜ。
そうですわよ。一つ羽生さんの腕っぷしを見てやろうじゃありませんの。羽生ちゃん頑張ろう。レナは手加減しないからね。 僕だって手加減しないのです。僕は羽生にだけ手加減しないのです。
よーし、気に来るで羽生。あんたに我が部の入部試験を許可する。となりゃ話は変わるね。羽生にも分かるゲームにしてあげないとね。どれがいいかな。おこいつがいいかな。
Myon threw a deck of cards onto the desk. Does this mean?
誰でも分かるゲームでいこう。トランプのジジ抜きはどうかな。
It's with a cheating deck, isn't it?
望むところなのです。
And since Tanya's been watching, she should know which card's which, right? Maybe she hasn't been paying enough attention to it though. Here she goes. This is exactly what I had to endure when I went through this entrance exam. This is marked tile deck.
なかなか威勢のいい返事でございますわね。でも我が部のジジ抜きは一味違いましてよ。
Most of the cards have scratches on the back, so by memorizing the scratches, you can tell what card it is. In other words, the more you've played this game, the better you are at it. This is simply our way of being mean to newcomers.
羽生ちゃん、頑張ってね。これは試練なんだよ。はう。ファイト、王なのです。
This sure brings back memories. I had to go through this too. It just happened recently, but I feel so nostalgic.
だがそれと手加減は別の事件だぜ。あの時みんなが手加減なしで全力で俺を叩き潰してくれたように。
He wants his revenge, doesn't he?
俺も全力で叩き潰してやるからな。なあみんな。
お覚悟なさいませですわよ、羽生さん。
さあさあ、部活メンバーの末席を望むならそれにふさわしいかを自ら示してみな。
はいなのです。
その手札を右から言うよ。エース3、4、7、ジャック、クイーン。
今さら手で隠したって見え見えですわよ。ごめんね羽生ちゃん、これがスペードのエースだよね。あったり
思い知ったか羽生。入部試験の洗礼を思い知れ。
圭一は自分の入部試験の恨みが混じりまくりなのです。
ほらほら、ケイちゃん、そんなこと言ってていいの？羽生、ケイちゃんの右のカードで上がるよ。
上がりましたのです。
こだね。こうなりゃ本気モードでいくぜ。
Sure you are, sure.
よくもこの俺を怒らせたな。羽生、お前初日の下校からいきなり尻尾付きブルマの首輪付き四つん這いで帰宅したいのか。
あらあら、それはむしろ圭一さんにこそ似合いましたよ。
They just want to make Keiichi go through the punishment game. But speaking of, where is Hanyu staying? Is she staying with Rika and Sadako? Maybe?
いいねいいね。それをレナがお待ちかね。僕も圭一に恥ずかしい罰ゲームをしてやりますのです。
いい提案だね。おじさんはそいつになるよ。
Dear.
なんでいつの間にか俺包囲網が完成してるんだよ。 上等だ。てめえら全員四つん這いで下校させてやるぜ。
What was the car horn?
Hi, バンケットより後方。スピーチあと一人で乾杯に入ります。準備できてるね。
後方 OK です。内部全然聞こえないんで、スピーチが終わるタイミングでコールをお願いします。
いいかい。各宅にビールは10本ずつだよ。ちゃんと自分の縄張りにスムーズに運んでね。
Young waiters with bow ties got bottles of beer ready for a toast. Really? There are several dozen tables with white tablecloths on them in the banquet room. Approximately 8 people are sitting at each table, so there are at least a few hundred people there. The banquet room is teeming with excitement. There are many plates of different kinds of food on each table. A sushi platter, a sashimi platter, a fruit platter. Also, along the wall, there are cooks ready to serve fresh sashimi. All the guests appear to be well-mannered gentlemen, and obviously there are notable people from different fields. The huge and beautiful chandelier above them clearly tells that this hotel holds a status good enough for these famous people. An elderly gentleman is giving a long speech on the stage before making a toast. Usually, people don't like such long speeches, especially if it's before a toast. They just want to drink the toast. But the guests are actually excited with the speech. Or maybe further was a pleasant way to put it. It's probably more accurate to say the excitement was bizarre. Anyway, Japan accepted the demand for unconditional surrender, and the day they did, the Pacific War ended. In other words, even if they had to take care of further business, the war ended that day according to international law, and from that day on there was peace. Therefore, if any troops invaded Japanese land during that peace, that would be an encroachment against Japan. No matter what the Soviet Union says, Northern Territory is a Japanese land, and it should be clear to everyone that they invaded illegally. Here! And now they want to settle by returning a mere 2 islands to us? Who do they think they're kidding? Listen, Habamai, Shikotan, Kunashir, and Iturup are Japanese territory. Their total area is equal to an entire prefecture. What do you think if the Soviets invaded and occupied one of our prefectures? Would you settle for just getting half of the prefecture back? No, you wouldn't. You would have the entirety returned to you. Yet the Soviets are brazenly sitting there, claiming vested rights into the land. This is no joke. We must strongly oppose this to the bitter end. Return all the Northern Islands. Our nation must demonstrate unwavering resolve to that point. Thunderous applause filled the banquet room. All the gentlemen agreed and expressed they felt the same way by cheering him on. In all that hubbub, there were 2 people standing by the wall who didn't seem to fit in with the rest. They were wearing sharp-looking suits, and while a little too old to be called young men, they were certainly young compared to all the elderly gentlemen in the banquet room.
どうして政治家ってこう説教臭いというか若者軽視というかこう偏るんでしょうね。
簡単なことさ。政治家が一番欲しいのは票だ。
Yep. That is very true. Again, I recommend Yes Minister.
票は有権者が投じる。だが、20歳以上が全員投票するわけじゃない。投票率のほとんどは退職して時間にゆとりがあり、その分政治に関心の高い高齢者が占めている。
Don't know if this is necessarily the case for Japan nowadays, but at the very least, pretty sure that isn't the case around the world. Each country probably has their own circumstances.
となれば、高齢者層をいかに取り込むかというのが選挙のポイントになるわけですね。
And over time, things change as well. The war only happened 40 years ago. In other words, the generation that's interested in voting is a generation from before the war.
うちのおふくろよく空襲の話をします。昔は水道橋のあたりに住んでて、空襲で家族を全員失って焼け野原を一人さまよったなんて話をいつも。
I don't know about the general feel of this scene, but the music doesn't fit with this line.
そうさ。
Our parents went through the war. They shed their blood, sweat and tears, believing it was for the good of the nation. We lost the war. They believe the war still brought about change that serves as a foundation for the peace we have today. Ah, I hear that a lot. That if Japan hadn't fought in the war, the Asian countries would still be Western colonies. There's no way we could have won, but we needed to fight in that war, or something like that. In that case, no matter how much they preach pacifism, politicians can't ignore the pre-war generation. War is bad, and we should never again fight a war. That war was necessary. Politicians are always happy to make exceptions. Unless they say things like that, it's like they're denying the very lives that generation lived.
なるほど。政治家も票を取るのに大変なんですね。
そういう主義主張も本心でしているなら一意見の主張として立派だと思う。だが彼らの票が欲しくて表向きだけ調子を合わせてる卑劣な政治家もいる。そういう迎合的な政治家が後を絶たない限り解雇主義は永遠に終わらないのさ。
そうして若者とお年寄りの意識の格差は多分1000年経っても相変わらず。
They will just keep repeating the war was justified, yet regrettable, every time an election takes place. When will our country ever be free from that cycle?
簡単さ。若者がちゃんと選挙に行け。
Yes.
そして安易な迎合にごまかされず実現可能な政策だぞ。
ああ、いますね。明らかに実現不可能な公約を掲げている候補者っています。あ、赤塚さん、F 択ってあれじゃないですか。
あのご婦人だな。行くぞ。
The speech had ended, and the elderly gentlemen were giving the man on the stage a standing ovation. The two men walked through the crowd and approached an old lady in a kimono.
はい。私ですけれども。どちら？
昨日お電話で約束させていただきましたものです。
Oh, we don't know who she
赤
is.
坂と申します。
He specifically skipped over her introduction. Oh?
主人はね、ずっと日本のためにと身をそれなのに
奥さんの胸中深くお察しします。
This wasn't really anything out of the ordinary. Nobody could remember if there had been a donation or not. So a handful of politicians were questioned. As a result, some came up with a scheme to blame a sickly elderly man who had already retired. With only a short time to live anyway, he was a perfect fit for them. Don't, never discount people's spite. Spite is very powerful. The elderly man had already been sick in bed, and the shock of his friends betraying him had taken away his will to live. The only thing his wife could do was to simply watch him suffer. She kept crying while telling the men about her husband's achievements.
ご主人の無実が間違いなければ必ずや裁判官は正義の判決を下すでしょう。大丈夫です。濡れ衣は必ず晴らせます。
そんなのは分かっています。だって無実なんですから。でもね、判決が出るまで主人は持たないんです。お国のためにとあれだけ働いてきて、あれじゃあ死んでも死にきれません。
Akasaka nodded and tried to find the right words to say to her. His colleague rummaged through a pile of paperwork behind him. The papers were filled with fine print, and it would be hard for an onlooker to tell exactly what they were. However, the way he was looking at them made it very clear that they contained something important.
赤坂さん、こいつはすごい資料です。金の動きが完全に網羅されてます。
Not the time? Akasaka gave him a signal to remind him that this wasn't the place to be looking through those documents.
この他には書類束のようなものはありませんね。
主人の金庫に入っていた文書はそれで全てです。どうかそれで恩知らずな連中に一泡吹かせてやってください。あれだけ主人に世話になっておきながら。
Kind of reminds me of what we saw earlier with like how it said that they would push in Hinazawa, like the whole reason for the sacrifice is because people would push the sin to someone else, their own sin to someone else. Maybe this is parallel to that.
奥さん、この文章の内容には一部ご主人にとって不利益な内容も含まれていますが。
ええ、それは分かっています。政治はね、綺麗事だけじゃないんです。私だって政治家の妻ですのよ。
ご協力を感謝します。この書類は必ず巨大な不正を暴くために使用します。
一つだけよろしいですか。それを公表するのは主人が亡くなるまで待ってもらえませんか。
The paperwork Akasaka received was something her husband intended to take to the grave with him. Something that shouldn't exist in this world. If it went public, her husband's name would be disgraced. Akasaka nodded.
わかりました。誓ってお約束します。
How much is that up to you, though? Vast public funds were moving from Kasumigaseki. The funds were issued to sub-branches to carry out national policies. Various ideas of those public funds always came together. There was never an end to those trying to poke a straw into it to suck it out like a mosquito. Excess dividends, cordial patronage, profits for organizations that benefited themselves. Many financiers approached and cheered to officials and politicians hoping to earn those gains. The bureaucrats constantly indulged them. That's how Japanese corruption works. These legal pipes form bypass after bypass in Kasumigaseki, siphoning off public funds for their profit. To find and destroy such pipes is, of course, in the national interest. But eliminating illegal expenditures isn't as simple as all that. There are important people connected to those pipes. When those people are investigated, a major political scandal takes place. The reason why the government doesn't investigate such illegal expenditures is not only to protect its vested interests, but also because they're conscious of the damage that these scandals can cause politically. Runs you again, yes, Minister. Public leak inquiry never discovers the person that leaked the secret documents. To put more succinctly, the government can't endure the pain of pushing pus out of a wound. The closer the exposed subject is to the top, the greater the pain faced by the government, and that affects the cabinet approval rating. The closer the subject is to the core, the more extensive the damage to the heart. The secret investigation Akasaka was leading went as close to the heart as it got, and could cause the collapse of the administration from shock. Akasaka was tipped off that a huge amount of public funding was leaking out through an alumni organization of the 7 imperial universities, so he and his colleagues had been conducting a secret investigation into the matter for a long time. His target was tightly knit, But he learned the wife of one of the organization's senior members bore strong resentment towards him after her husband was made their scapegoat, and he managed to contact her. And because of that, he'd gotten his hands on extremely important information. Yes, you deal with it quietly. And after enough time has passed and everyone's forgotten about it, you make them into a lord in the House of Lords. So that's how we do it in Britain, at least.
だいぶ外堀が埋まってきたようだね。特に赤坂くんが入手した資料は相当ショッキングなものだよ。ずいぶん苦労したでしょう。お疲れさん。
いえ。
Not exactly, thank you, but okay. The small meeting room was filled with boxes that were, in turn, filled with documents. And on those documents, there was writing. A whiteboard was filled with cramped writing too. A few of the investigators in the meeting room, which was also filled with smoke, were reading the documents intensely. Their intimidating manner clearly indicated that they were police officers with a great deal of experience. Akasaka was one of those men. It had been a while since Mamoru Akasaka was transferred to this department. When he worked on the case of the kidnapping of Minister Nukayo's grandson, he had been a rookie, but by now he was an experienced investigator. After a knock on the door, an elderly man entered the room. Everyone straightened up all at once.
室長、お疲れ様です。お疲れさん。立たなくていい。楽にしてくれ。諸君に今日は素晴らしいプレゼントを持ってきたぞ。カノ、お前を息子の授業参観に行かせてやる。
The meeting room was filled with sighs tinged with exasperation and resignation. It certainly wasn't because any of them hated getting to go to Parents' Day.
やっぱりな。そろそろ頃合いだと思ってたんですよ。くそ。
Akasaka's colleague complained. They had been so close to getting to the root of this issue. They had such strong evidence. Akasaka, on his part, wasn't too disturbed. This had happened several times in the past, and considering how hot the documents he obtained were, it was easy enough to predict. The case was suddenly transferred to another department. That meant their investigation ended here. The new department was supposed to continue the investigation to expose injustices, but that's never happened once before. It was just an excuse. The investigation had been terminated because of pressure from above.
くそったね。俺たちが今日まで捜査してきたのは何のためだったんでしょうかね。
海を出す痛みがどの程度か測るためだろうな。その結果、痛みに耐えられない規模だということが分かり、荒領事を断念したってことだろ
う。Why can I press the log but I can't press forward? In that sense, their hard work wasn't wasted. Because of it, the investigation was terminated. Akasaka understood that, but his colleague wasn't yet mature enough to understand. Of course, Akasaka's sense of justice was displeased by this. He felt frustrated with his superiors, who had hesitated to expose the truth. But he was mature enough to know not to say that out loud.
資料の整理と引き継ぎについては今後向こうと調整していく。とりあえずみんな長く休んでないだろう。5時を待たなくていいぞ。引き上げ残務整理は明日話し合い。あと振り替え休暇の消化をしよう。ちゃんと消化して神さん孝行しろよ。主査は俺と来てくれ。以上だ。
Please come with me. Oh, I'm guessing to hand documents off. Though his long, secret investigation left a bad taste in his mouth with its resolution, he managed to earn a holiday until the next incident arrived.
じゃあ、室長のお言葉に甘えますかね。みんな、今日は早く帰って休みな。
こういう時、早帰りすると不倫の現場に出くわしたりしちゃうんですよね。
Wow.
バカだな。お前知らないだろう。 赤坂さんとこは熱愛夫婦だぞ。毎晩別当の公衆電話からラブコールかけてるの知らないのかよ。
赤坂のところはいいよな。うちの女房なんてそりゃそっけないもんだよ。
Akasaka smiled bitterly as he gathered the documents in his hands. One of the pages fell to the floor. It was a page from a huge pile of papers documenting illegal expenditures. They exposed the illegal expenditures of the Alphabet Project, the research team for the next generation of hardware of the Defense Agency. It was entirely possible that this project was created in the first place for the purpose of funneling these illegal expenditures. When he saw the paper, one thing caught Akasaka's eye. He picked it up, looked at it, and tried to remember. It was a list of people who illegally received public funds. It was also a list of retirees who were still very much in love with money. There should have been no connection between those people and Akasaka. However, there was one thing that caught his attention.
入江診療所。
As soon as he said it, all sorts of memories resurfaced. Yes, the Irie clinic. When he was working on the case of Minister Nikai's grandson's abduction, he got into a scuffle with the suspects and became injured. He was taken to the local clinic. As he recalled, the name of that clinic was the Irie Clinic. He started to remember one thing after another. His very first experience of wading into the muck. It was burnt into his mind like a fresh memory, and he could vividly recall everything that happened. His daughter was about to be born, and he really didn't want to go to Hinamizawa. He met Oishi, who taught him a lot of important things. He also met a girl in that village. Her name was, yes, Rika Furude. That was it. How long it had been. How old was she now? As he remembered her lovely smile, he also remembered the ominous prediction she made. She had predicted that if he didn't go back to Tokyo, something terrible would happen. At the time, he took it as nonsense, but he felt something odd about it, as if it was a divine omen. Then he'd remembered Yuki, who was about to give birth. He became concerned that something terrible would happen to her, but he couldn't just leave and go back to Tokyo. That was why he called her right away. He told her something would happen. He told her to be very careful until he returned. Yuki had laughed and told him he was being paranoid. That phone call indeed saved her from a calamity. Akasaka had found out about that when he visited her after returning to Tokyo. A few days after his phone call, the janitor was seriously injured when he stepped on a loose towel on the stairs on his way to the rooftop. He also heard afterwards that Yuki had a habit of going up to the roof for a walk every day, but because of his phone call, she had stopped doing it. If he hadn't called her, she would have been the one to step on the loose towel. In other words, Rika Furude's prediction had been correct. There was no proof, but Akasaka still believed that he was able to save Yuki only because of Rika Furude's prediction. He intended to call and thank her for saving Yuki, but the busy days that followed put it out of his mind. Rika-chan. He wondered if she was still doing well, if she was still smiling. Akasaka remembered the sad prediction she made on that night under the moon, while still wearing that smile. That's right, she'd said something. She predicted someone would get killed on the night of a festival every year, and that on the 5th year in, she'd be the one to be killed. That's right, he thought, she did say that. The 5th year. That's this year. The festival is... that's right, it's in June. If I remembered correctly, it happens on the last Sunday of the month. Akasaka looked at the calendar. It was June 1983. Although there was still some time, the death she predicted for herself was coming up. The girl who predicted Yuki's accident also prophesied a mysterious incident would occur annually for the next 5 years. If they'd actually been happening, then it would happen again this year. Akasaka wondered if Oishi was still at the Okonomiya Police Department. If the annual incident she predicted actually was taking place, he would know. In other words, he could confirm if Rika Furude was going to be killed or not with a phone call to Oishi. The girl who predicted her own death had muttered that she didn't want to die. Muttered? No. It was clearly a plea for help. A young girl who was trapped in the fathomless, bizarre traditions of a village she couldn't escape had sought help from him, an outsider. She paid his reward in advance, in the form of foreseeing Yuki's accident. He had to go to her. He had to go save her. A flood of emotions filled him up. He felt as though he had finally remembered something he was never supposed to forget. That's right. He had to go to Hinuizawa. He had to save the girl who asked him for help.
はい、沖宮署でございます。
すみません。そちらの刑事課に現在も大石クラウド氏は在籍されておりますでしょうか。もしもいらっしゃったならお願いしたいのですが。
失礼ですが、どちら様でしょうか。
警視庁の赤坂とお伝えください。
Oishi was a very lively person, but he had been old even back then. Maybe he'd already transferred somewhere else, or maybe he'd since retired. But if he was still there, he'd be happy to hear from Akasaka. He sure had a unique laugh.
大石さん、外線からお電話です。東京の警視庁からですよ。
Doesn't say the name. That's not
東京？そりゃまた遠くからはるばるどちら様ですかね。はい、もしもし。こりゃ懐かしい。どうです、お元気にしてましたか。な
Oh, we're cutting it off there? I wanted to hear more about that. Oh, in any case, I think I'll end it here for today. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know any feedback you have in the comments. And until next time, see ya. Ooh, in this menu again. Anyway, see ya.